Joining us now, MSNBC's The Weekend primetime co-host and the Washington Post opinion columnist, Catherine Rampell, and former Congressional Budget Office Director and American Action Forum President Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Ashley Parker is still with us. Catherine, what does a good deal look like to President Trump?
It's whatever President Trump says is a good deal at any given moment.
Do we know what he likes? What he wants to see?
It's all about marketing for him. He is the master of repackaging the status quo as a victory. And that's basically what he's been doing over and over and over again with all of these deals, frameworks for concepts of deals, except we are actually much worse off than, in fact, the prior status quo, because he will declare victory. Oh, we have a deal when he partially rolls back tariffs on another country, but the tariffs are still much higher than was the case before he came into office.
Didn't we see a version of this with the USMCA during the first administration?
Absolutely.
He said it's the most amazing deal, and it really wasn't that much different than NAFTA.
It was not very different from NAFTA, and in fact, what was new in it was largely just transplanted from a different trade deal that he had pulled us out of, or that he basically put the kibosh on before we could formally be added to it, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So he kind of mashed together two things that he said were terrible and said this is the best deal ever, and then, of course, violated the terms of that deal. Now, that was a real deal in the sense that Congress had to ratify it. That is how this is supposed to work. The executive branch negotiates the terms of these things, and then it's supposed to go through Congress so that the terms can actually be implemented. And in that case, Trump touted it as this big victory. And then, of course, he comes back into office and says, that was junk. I'm going to disregard everything in it. That was the deal with Canada and Mexico. And then he levied new tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which is part of the reason why I think it's very difficult to call any of what he is doing a deal, in the sense of it's not binding. And certainly he just unilaterally tears things up whenever he wants to. So it's very difficult to get countries to give meaningful concessions, because they understand, that he's not going to honor his end of the bargain anyway.
And Douglas, we've been talking about this for 90 days now. And I said a little bit earlier that I'm kind of lost in the sauce here, because I can't tell what the president wants or what he's doing or what he's going to do tomorrow. And I'm not negotiating with him. So if you are a country that's trying to find common ground for tariffs, how do you approach this?
Well, I think Catherine summarized the state of play really well. And I think the important thing is that, the effective U.S. tariff rate now is 15%. It's up to 17% in the aftermath of the so-called spate of deals this week. So that's worlds away from the 2% or less that it was before he took office. So with all of this, I'm making a deal, let's cut a deal, let's pause, let's raise, let's lower. The reality is he has imposed on the rest of the world the tariffs that he promised when he was campaigning. And we always talk about the uncertainty, but the certain thing is tariffs are higher and will remain higher if he is president of the United States. And so if you're in another country, you're like, well, he's not going to honor anything I want. He's going to get what he wants. Let's go look elsewhere for trading partners. And that's what's going on. There is, in fact, a real fallout from this, which is a reshaping of global supply chains and trading relationships and geopolitical relationships. And he may view this as fun and games in the art of the deal, but it has real ramifications for the operation of the U.S. economy, which has been damaged by this, and by our standing in the world.
So who benefits from this?
I think there's been very little benefit to the United States. I mean, you can find some particular cases, but there's damage to our relationship with allies. So right now he has violated the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. Senate ratified, done over many, many years under both Republicans and Democrats. He says, I'm going to put a 25% tariff on Korea. Well, that's just a flat violation. It's the same as the USMCA. So who's going to get into the serious business of a trade deal, something that's a couple of hundred pages long, ratified by the Senate? He called the deal with Vietnam a deal. It's a Truth Social post. He's calling the letters he's sending to other people with no response a deal. Those aren't deals. That's him just imposing these taxes. And remember, despite his strange way of playing, keeping score, these are taxes on the American businesses and the American people who use those products. Yeah, and they will take their toll. And you can't escape that.
It's a declaration.
Yeah.
So I guess the question that I have, Doug, is at what point do people start to feel it? I mean, You're already feeling it in some sectors. I've mentioned this before.
Sure.
I mean, I had to pay UPS a tariff. The cost of the item was the same. And I thought, okay, great. You know, this country is eating the cost of the item. It got sent to me. And when UPS knocked on my door, they said, oh, by the way, you owe us $100. And I said, what? I mean, so at what point does it start to be felt and absorbed by the American public? And is there an expectation for how the American public is going to respond, who they're going to blame for that?
Well, I think the hard answer is the pace and the size of the impacts over the course of the second half of this year. But in the end, every dollar of those tariffs will end up as a cost to the businesses who have to pay them, and every dollar will get passed along to customers somewhere. You can count on that. And that dollar will not be available to spend on something else. And so that'll harm growth and employment and output in other parts of the economy. So we will pay for this with higher prices, slower economic growth, inevitably. And everyone's just been waiting for the shoe to drop, and they expect it to happen in a month or 2 months. It's going to be a slower process than that. But the second half of this year, I expect to be much slower as a result of this. And the Fed is in the untenable position of saying, do I worry about employment or do I worry about the inflation? And we'll see that for the next 6 months.
So you bring up the Fed. That's interesting. Donald Trump has now has his bill in place, Ashley, his tax and spend bill. He's doing these tariffs, which aren't going away. They're going to change, but they're going to stay. And he's been going after the Fed and will soon have his own new Fed chair. He might even have a shadow Fed chair for a little while when Jerome Powell leaves office next year. Scott Bessent seems to be applying for that job. The Treasury Secretary has been critical, which is unusual, of the Fed chair. If Scott Bessent or someone like him takes that role, what is Donald Trump going to expect of them?
So the president is going to expect, as he expects of all of, as he would say, his people, my justices, for Scott Bessent or whoever's in that role to do his bidding and to not keep it as such an independent entity. But Trump has made quite clear that he wants interest rates lowered. Much of the population, myself included, would love interest rates lowered. But the job of the Fed chair is to balance all of that with what is good for the economy and what is good for growth and a number of other factors beyond Donald Trump wanting a lower interest rate. But that would be the tremendous pressure, and quite clearly what Trump has already essentially said publicly he would hope for from any Fed chair.
Well, there are 11 other folks on the Federal Reserve Board, so they'd have to contend with the 11 others on deciding to lower or even raise rates.